Wildfires are another naturally occurring hazard, uh, but the key question is whether the global warming related cascades of increasing temperature, increasing humidity, uh, and vegetation changes are actually increasing effects of wildfires. It turns out that the signal is not so clear. There is no indication that wildfires are increasing in number, but there is indication that some places become more vulnerable. Let's say lightning starts a fire, western US, California especially, with its vegetation, if it is experiencing long-term drought, which can be related to climate, then this is becoming more vulnerable to wildfires. So the wildfire season there is becoming now pretty much all year long. Okay, so number of fires may not be increasing, but obviously the area burnt increases, people exposed increases because people move closer to the woods, and so on and so forth. So these are four different models that use various data and mathematical equations, relations between dryness, rain, temperature, season, etc., to estimate wildfires. Show that there is year-to-year variability, but there is no clear trend. If anything, maybe there is a decrease, but this is often related to humans managing wildfires, trying to reduce the number of wildfires. There are debates about whether that's a good idea or a bad idea, but we won't get into that. So, million kilometers squared burned over this time, if anything, is flat or maybe slightly decreasing. With that in mind, you have to look at global mortality from wildfire smoke. So wildfires obviously immediately increase smoke and heat. They also produce particulate matter and other volatile organic carbons, CO2, carbon monoxide, methane, aerosols, and so on, which can travel pretty far depending on where they happen. Okay, so this is the figure from this paper here showing wildfire mortality globally estimated to be 339,000 per year. 339,000 per year. That's not a small number. And here are the spots where wildfires happen, going pretty far north, all the way here into the Arctic Circle, Siberia. Okay, you remember the wildfires of 2010 related to the heat wave, and this year, 2020, has already had record high temperatures and heat waves in the Arctic region of Siberia. Okay, so there are lots of fires in the Amazonia region, parts of South America, central southern Africa, lots here in parts of Europe and Asia, India, and of course Indonesia. There are complicated factors here. Many natural wildfires are related to things like El Nino. If you don't know it, then you can look up my podcasts on YouTube under the same channel. During El Nino, there is droughts here, and they can cause wildfires, but El Ninos are predicted 3 to 6 months ahead, so there is some evidence that developers and people who want to grow palm oil tend to set fires based on El Nino predictions, saying El Nino is coming, so this is caused by El Nino. So we are complicated human beings, as we said, right? Australia had massive wildfires last year, which led to death of like 1 billion animals. Really tragic, right? So the health effects of the wildfire smoke, here is the size of population affected by exposure. Here is the total public health impact, which is hard to measure. Excess deaths, hospitalizations, and emergency room visits, they are easier to measure. and increasing smoke concentration and or increasing susceptibility. Okay, so in the lower range here you have subclinical effects with no symptoms, so asymptomatic, decrease in lung infection, heart rate variability, endothelial function. I won't go into the details. Respiratory, cardiovascular, and other symptoms, and medicine use. Urgent care, physician office visits, restricted activity days, hospitalization, and deaths. Okay, those are the range. There is often a feedback between wildfires and the local weather. When the wildfire gets very big, as it did in Australia, so much heat is generated that it begins to create its own microclimate, and the question is whether that microclimate or the weather favors fire and spreading of the fire, let's say by creating winds, strong winds, which can spread the fire and makes it harder for the firemen to put out the fire. Firemen, firewomen, of course, as well. Okay, so wildfires are a dangerous contributor to human health impacts. This kind of transitions into air pollutions. I will do that in the next podcast. Forest fires, obviously, wildfires obviously contribute tremendously to air pollution, and as I said, the pollution can be carried quite far by winds. Smoke from the Canadian fires came down to Washington D.C. a few years ago, for example. The latest California fires this year became so huge that they created massive aerosol loading all the way up to Seattle and all the way across to the eastern coast of the US, and so on. Okay, this is not a trivial contribution to global loading of pollution and aerosols.